Welcome to the Ancestral Mind podcast. My name is Colin Stuckert, founder and CEO of Wild Foods Co. and the AncestralMind.com. I'm here with Brent Philbin from Crypto Basic Podcast, our producer and co-host who needs to figure out how to work audio gear.
Colin's really salty. I'm salty too because we just recorded
45
this episode
minutes.
and noticed most of the way in that we weren't going to be able to use it, so we had to start over.
We're committed, so we're going again.
We're here now. You're still going to get that same great content. In fact, I wasn't even being particularly funny, so I think I screwed up a little bit. I need to toss in some more dad jokes.
Okay, well, on the Ancestral Mind podcast, we're here to cover all things health from an ancestral perspective. We want to help you build an ancestral mind so you can think about the decisions you make on a daily basis while considering the first principles of what makes you a sexy human animal.
And I often dwell on the fact that I'm a sexy human animal.
My name is Colin Stuckert. I moved to Austin 4 years ago to start Wild Foods Co. after my past life as a gym owner, blogger, and juice bar owner. Brent likes long walks on the beach, or living on the beach and not walking on the beach, I should say, because that's what it was like when I used to live with him.
I think I lived on the actual beach when we lived together at that place.
You went there once or twice.
Maybe once or twice. The second time I lived there, I went there a lot more. But
And also do us a favor and rate us on iTunes while also leaving us a comment, like, feedback, whatever. You can send emails to ancestralmind@gmail.com or info@wildfoods.co. That's .co. Brent, last episode, what did we talk about?
Last episode, we talked about, well, the first one we talked about our environment. And then the last episode, we gave the big picture overview of the different areas of living ancestrally and having that ancestral mind.
Yeah, we did. It was kind of just like a big overview of the concepts of evolutionary biology, of the mismatch concept. And it's basically about how humans lived in the wild 12,000 plus years ago before we invented agriculture and we changed everything. Before we had technology, iPhones, toilets, grocery stores, we lived in the wild our entire lives, usually with a small band of other humans. And it directs everything that makes the healthy or unhealthy human animal is by mimicking how we used to live. And today, we are completely mismatched, completely backwards. We go into all the different ways that is. Today's show is actually about food and how our food system, how much we eat, and then more importantly, what kinds of food we're eating, that is completely mismatched. And as a result, we have a 40% obesity rate. We have about a 60 to 70% of Americans are overweight. And other countries around the world that are becoming more industrialized and affluent, like China and India, are having increased levels of obesity as well because all the big food companies are going in there and just messing shit up.
It's a sad day when they're catching up to us. We're not going to be the stupid fat Americans anymore, Colin.
No, eventually we're going to be a global species of fat, dumb people.
You made me think of a question that I have for you.
Okay.
You said that you mentioned toilets as one of the things that we invented. Do you have a squatty potty?
No, because I'm flexible enough to just squat on the lid.
Wait, so when you poop, you squat on the lid?
Yes.
What? How have I never seen that before?
How have you never seen me poop?
Well, yeah, but I feel like I should have gotten a picture. I am going to try now. That's my new mission.
The squatty potty gave me the idea to even do that, and then I'm like, oh, well, wait, this is the way to do it. And then if you actually look at the way they, like in China, when they have the toilets that are basically on the ground,
holes in the ground,
everyone's squatting, right? It's the natural way to do it because when you're a functional, healthy human, you can usually squat ass to grass. And if you can't, it's because you're in disrepair.
Yeah, I certainly can't.
You're not using your body, your limbs, you're not moving enough, etc. And that's just another mismatch. You know, maybe we'll do a whole episode on posture and things like that. But today's episode is sponsored by Wild Foods Co. Get your obsessively sourced real foods and supplements from trusted suppliers around the world. Check out our full selection of superfoods over at wildfoods.co and use code AMPodcast12 for 12% off your entire order. Brent, what's your current favorite Wild Foods product? And I know you haven't tried many, but I know there's one.
I've tried a lot. The one that I use the most is clearly the Mct Oil. I put that in a lot of things. I have been reading up on the benefits of that, and it's all good. And as we'll get to later in the episode, when I had some stints when I was doing ketogenic diet, the Mct Oil was super helpful for getting into ketosis faster.
Yeah, and you can also cook with it. I put it in my butter coffee, things like that in the morning. It's a great all-purpose, all-around oil that's also good for massage and some other things in the bedroom. If you want to experiment, that's something. It's not really our approved use, but you would probably approve using it that way.
Well, I feel like maybe Wild Foods should have a subsidiary called Wild Sex. And maybe we start with MCT oil-based wild sex products.
Sam would not be happy because we have to focus.
Okay, focus. Stop talking about sex, Colin.
All right, let's get into today's episode, all about real food. Now, we did 45 minutes until my co-host, who's I don't have the words for him, but we lost 45 minutes of me doing a lot of the talking, actually. So for him, it probably was fun and funny. And so I'm still a little salty about that, but we're going to keep this to 2 episodes. Yeah, we're going to break this up because it's a long episode anyway. So this is going to be like part 1 of food, of real food, of nutrition. And then part 2, we'll just figure out wherever we left off. We'll get right into it. And so the overview we have today, I'm going to list these off real quick. We got realness. We got number 2 is as close to you as possible, talking about food should be local, ideally, about food should not be stored and travel long distances. Then number 3, we talk about cooking a little bit. What are the best methods of cooking? What cooking methods to stay away from? Number 4 is all about the things you should be avoiding the most, particularly sugar and grains. And then number 5, we're going to touch on the differences between keto and paleo. And that's actually going to be probably, maybe we'll end there, or that'll be where we pick up on the part 2 of this show, because we could kind of go on that for a while, actually. That almost deserves its own show. Even just the keto diet itself, because
we're going to definitely have our full show on keto, especially with Logan being a likely guest.
We'll do it when Logan comes on the show as well. And so I guess we'll start with those. We'll go from there. So before we lost all of that awesome footage we had, Brent, what did we talk about for the first point?
Well, we talked about a lot of things, but the first point that we're trying to make is make sure your food is real versus processed or unreal. I don't know what the right term is.
Yeah, not real
food.
Right.
So you want to have the number one thing that you said for that was making sure that your food on the shelf does not have a very long shelf life, because the longer the shelf life for something that might not be a single ingredient item, the more likely it is that is going to be further away from an ancestral style food,
further
or
away
real
from
food.
nature. It's going to be more likely to have preservatives. It's going to be more likely to have been heated or treated, or even treated with radiation, things like that. Like a lot of spices actually go through a low dose of, it's called non-irradiated. It's irradiation, I believe it's called. And I think it's a low dose of radiation. And they use that to kind of like kill pathogens or whatever. But these are all things that can be done, that maybe there's a little thing on the label that they said they did, or maybe they don't even tell you. And basically, the further away from its raw natural state, usually the worse it is. And so you want to avoid foods that sit on the shelf for long periods of time. And we use example of Zombieland and the Twinkies, because Twinkies basically last forever, and you don't. And that's, in fact, I read recently, some guy had a Big Mac that he left in his garage, I think for like a few years, and it must have been like wrapped up or something. But he went back to it; it looked exactly the same, and he ate it, and it was fine. Apparently.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
he ate it.
Or at least he took a bite and he said it tasted the same, right? And so that's a perfect example. Whether that story is true or not, that's a perfect example of fake food versus real food, right? Real food should go bad. Now there are some exceptions here. Something like organic cocoa powder, which is a very shelf-stable ingredient. Yeah, you can buy that, and it can sit in your pantry for a long period of time. Even like organic white rice, that's a grain, and we'll kind of talk about rice at some point, but that is something that can store well. It's a single ingredient. It's not multiple ingredients. It's not a manufactured food, and there are certain exceptions there. Now, we also talked about, Brent, the difference between a whole food and refined ingredients. Do you remember what differentiated those two?
Well, basically the refined ingredient set is the more stuff you put into an item, whether it be a soup or whether it be even just an apple, and you start adding stuff to it. The more stuff you put in there, the more likely you are to find a problem along the way. So I think I'm going in the right direction here.
Well, you're answering a different question, but the question was refined versus whole. First, define that. Let's define that.
Yeah.
And you don't really put things in apples.
Define that. I'm going to say it wrong.
Okay. So whole food would be an apple. And then what would be a refined part that you could get out of an apple?
Oh, okay. So you could take the fructose out of the apple.
You could take the fructose or the sugar, right? Yeah. Or if you took even apple juice, right? And you remove all the fiber and all that, and you have just the juice, which is basically water and the sugar, right? And maybe you have little vitamins and minerals in there, but that would be the difference between a whole food and a refined food. And so the number one food added ingredient in the world in the food processing industry today is, do you remember?
It is high fructose corn syrup.
Well, it's sugar.
Okay, yeah, it's sugar.
And high fructose corn syrup is another form of sugar made from corn, basically.
Like an even shittier form of sugar than regular sugar.
It's even worse. And what's funny is high fructose corn syrup actually has, I believe it's 55% fructose, whereas regular cane sugar or beet sugar, which is the bulk of when you see sugar on an ingredient label, it's usually cane or beet sugar, right? It's still fruit sugar. It's 50% fructose and 50% glucose. High fructose corn syrup, though, is, I believe, only 55% fructose, right? That 5%, right? Now, it's made from corn. It's not good for you, and there's a lot of other problems with it. But sugar and high fructose corn syrup, for most people, are the same thing.
Right.
And sugar is in everything. Literally everything at this point, okay? And so when we talk about realness of an ingredient, I was talking about whole foods versus food that is basically manufactured by a company by taking a bunch of refined ingredients and putting them together. Now, like a piece of Wonder Bread, right? It's going to have like 40 ingredients or whatever it has. And each one of those ingredients is a refined single ingredient. You have the grains, you have, I don't even know what else goes in Wonder Bread, but it's a bunch of crap. Like you have all that stuff that they then put together and make this piece of bread, right? And then you have, on another hand, you have something like, chicken, which is ingredient one. One chicken, it's just chicken, right? Or an apple that doesn't even have an ingredients list, right? Or a pear or whatever. Now, that's kind of the primary difference between processed refined food and just whole food. And I'm going to make a bold statement here, if everybody simply started buying and eating whole foods.
Also, I want to clarify, we're not talking about Whole Foods, the business. We're talking about Whole Foods, the
foods that are
type
whole,
of food. Yes.
Yeah, foods that are whole. It would pretty much fix the obesity epidemic overnight.
They would do a few things. It would also put a lot of pressure on those companies that are making the choices to.
We would change the food industry. Yeah, we would literally change the food industry forever.
In the food, yes. But as with all of those things, it's a commons tragedy. And what are you familiar with Tragedy of the Commons?
I've read about it quite a few times, but go ahead and remind me.
The trick is on a commons tragedy is recycling is like this, or maybe even like going vegan or global warming, any of these things. Or voting is another common example. But basically, the right thing to do is for everybody to do the thing, but no single person's action has any obvious effect. So the tragedy is that most people won't do a thing because they don't see the effect of them doing it, and they don't get consequences for not doing it. So you can kind of cheat. You can be the person who never does the dishes and makes your roommates do them because you just never do them and they'll eventually do them and wash your dishes. Or you don't have to go vote because people are voting anyways, so there's somebody who's getting elected.
I don't know if that applies here, though, because most people, and if you look at the food industry, it is changing. But because the dollars matter, and corporations pay attention to their margins, the stockholders pay attention to the profit, and also new companies that sprout up to serve a lot of these keto, paleo, whatever, these new demographics and these new trends. Well, then investors invest in those companies and they make more money and then they grow. And then the food industry is like, oh, well, I'm going to go buy up that company, or we need to do some R&D to make sure we take advantage of this wave. So like it's if it was just one thing you could do, like if it was very black or white, if it was very binary, I kind of understand. Like voting is like kind of like you do it or you don't, right?
Well, you either eat the whole foods or you don't. And then if everyone ate in that same manner versus right now, the majority of people eating in the manner of, I'm eating the thing that tastes the best and has the most sugar because it tastes better that way, then it would put the pressure on the companies that are making the choices to add the high fructose corn syrup and stuff like that to your food, and they would have to change what they were doing too. So it would change everything.
It's happening though. I mean, that's why you want to know who's buying up all the small organic food companies that are following these trends. It's all the big food companies. Because they don't even know how to do the RD&D, so they're just literally buying them up.
RD&D.
RD&D.
They do the role playing. They're I'm the fighter, you're the fighter. We need a bard.
So this is definitely a tangent, but I think the point is, and also you have the secondary side effects. Like if you're going to be eating that food, you're going to continually every year gain a few more pounds and be a little bit sicker and have to take more pharmaceuticals, and then eventually you're going to get a preventable disease, and it's going to shorten your life. And so there are other variables here other than just like, let's change the food industry based on what we're paying for or whatever. Also, the other point is, not only do you not give these companies your money, but you actually support the other small companies. And as they grow, like I said, they get the attention of investors, they get the attention of other consumers. And then like with enough time, I think we're going to increase a lot of these different demographics, and we're going to really change the food industry, at least to whatever ceiling we're going to hit. There's still going to be the majority, I think at this point, the majority of people, like in the United States, for example, or in China or India, when they're fully into a food industry and have industrialized food, there's going to be the bulk of people that want to buy cheap food that don't care. That's just going to be a part of that's always.
Or that's all they can afford. I mean,
yeah,
eating
healthy
is really expensive.
Well, I'm glad you said it that way so adamantly, because we'll have a whole show on that, because that's not exactly accurate. Especially when you factor in other variables. Also, when you're cooking and you're batch cooking, buying in bulk, when you don't have to go to the doctor, when you don't have to have expensive health insurance, there's a lot of variables that come into play. It might seem cheaper right now, but over the long run, eating healthy is always better and more price effective. So, number one, again, is the realness. So, as little processing as possible and buying whole real foods, and avoiding things that are in a box of package that sit on the counter and that have long ingredient lists. This is just a good heuristic to have. Avoid as many of the manufactured foods as possible. You have anything to add for that, Brent?
No, so that's the big actionable item you're talking about here. You're saying like I almost call it this: stay on the outskirts of in a normal grocery store. The outskirts is where you're going to find the meats. It's where you're going to find the vegetables, the fruits, and that kind of thing. If you stay out there, you've got more of a chance of getting the right things, or just go to the organic section or whatever. But then if you start going into the middle aisles and navigating those landmines,
there's not much in the middle of stores, anyways, that you want.
Yeah,
like there's very few things. Okay, number 2, close to you as possible. So this is the idea of local food. Now, we talked a little bit about organic, not organic. We talked about some of that in the show that we've lost. We'll have to like refer to this as like the show we lost, like the land before time or something.
We're talking about the same thing.
I'm going to be talking about this for years to come. Like the episode 3, the show we lost. We were talking about getting to know your farmer, asking them questions, and there's a lot here. But the first thing is, the reason you want to buy local is because food that's perishable, and that's, again, food that would be on the perimeter of the grocery store because it has to be refrigerated. You want those foods to be as close to you as possible. You don't want them to travel, and because when they have to travel, they need either extra preservatives, they need extra heat, or they need extra things done to them to make them safe for travel. Did you know that they'll literally will ship apples when they're green and then spray them with ripening chemicals, so by the time they arrive at their destination, they've ripened? Like crap like that. Like, and you can taste it. Like almost none of us have had a really good organic apple off the tree. Like it probably would taste like unlike anything you can even imagine, right? And we have all this crap produce in the grocery store that's been shipped halfway around the world. So getting to know your farmer and finding out what they do things, what they believe, asking them questions, and having a relationship with the people that make your food is just going to be the number one thing that people can do. And of course, raising your own food is even better. But that's maybe something we'll visit later on. Yeah, because for most people,
Colin's
it's just not
gonna
practical.
get some chickens soon.
Chickens, goats. I want to have some beef. We're gonna do a lot of cool things.
I wanted to throw in a little anecdote here because I feel like you're the first person who's talked to me about the distance that food needs to travel to your mouth. But then I realized it's not the first time I've thought about that. I feel like I can't be the only one who thinks about this, but beer, when you talk about how Corona tastes different in Mexico, or the Guinness factory actually specifically rates how far away the Guinnesses need to travel from their factory to give them like a flavor rating. We've heard that. People have heard that before. People have specifically thought about that when they're drinking beer, but not when they're drinking regular food. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. Obviously, Colin doesn't drink beer, but That is, it was just a random little thought that I had. So that applies to actual food as well.
People pay more attention to their beer and their wine and their alcohol than they do the freaking food.
Yeah.
Right? It's a perfect example of just how disconnected we are from even knowing anything about our food.
It needs to become cool to know more about your food, because right now it is cool to be like where did that porter come from?
Yeah.
Is that a local brewery, or are we talking about a brewery in another state? Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's move on to so we close to you as possible. Oh, and again, the same disclaimer I gave in the show that was lost. That's what we're gonna call it, the show that was lost. And was, if this is not going to be all-encompassing, so we're just dipping our toe into the kiddie pool on all these topics. There's a lot that we can do on these. We'll cover a lot more later on, but don't get frustrated if we didn't explain it fully, or if you have any questions or anything like that. In fact, we want you to send us feedback so we can cover some of these things that you might be fuzzy on. Now, when I talk about these things, for me, I will probably gloss over things that might be basic because to me, they just are knowns, right? But to you, it might be something that you've never even heard or you don't have a full picture of. And so it can kind of create some dissonance in your brain. I want you to send me those questions so we can make sure to answer them. That helps us tremendously. It helps us with focus. It helps us with giving you the content that you want. And you can get us that feedback by sending us an email to info@wildfoods.co or ancestralmind@gmail.com. Anything you'd like to add before we move on, Brent?
No, send questions as much as humanly possible, even if you think they're stupid. Because if they are legitimately not something we want to put on the air, we're still going to answer it. Whether we put it on air or not, we are going to send you an answer to this question. So you will be able to help yourself in your nutritional journey. I'm not very knowledgeable about a lot of this stuff, so I'm going to try to ask Colin the important questions on air. Mm-hmm. But we need help from you, the people, the ancestralites.
The wildlings.
But this isn't a wild podcast.
Yeah, but they're still wildlings, man.
Right.
We're all wild peoples. And, everyone likes Game of Thrones, so might as well just use it. All right, number 3, cooking. Use slow cooking. Stay away from high heat grilling if possible, and smoking. Don't ever blacken or burn your ingredients. That anytime there's black in the cooking process, it's almost always carcinogens in there. And slow cooking and doing things at as low temperature as possible is always going to be treating your ingredients better. It's going to reduce you get any of the free radical damage or any of that other stuff that can happen as a byproduct of cooking. That said, cooking is very important to open up a lot of nutrition, to denature proteins, and to basically give us access to nutrition that we wouldn't have been able to get from raw food. And do not be fooled by the raw foodists. You literally cannot survive on a raw food diet, kind of like you can't really survive on a 100% plant-based diet. But again, we'll talk about both of those probably at a later date.
Right. We started living more as a species when we figured out fire could cook our food and stop it from having all of the possible diseases that might have been attached to it. I had an interesting anecdote here of me and my food preferences that I feel like people might not know this, and
Go for it.
Kind of fits. Cooking food changes the chemical makeup of the food. I actually have two specific things. One, a friend of mine was telling me how he handles getting diarrhea while he's traveling. And he had this list of foods. It was like bananas, and there was another thing. And then he said toast was part of that. And I'm like, toast? Why didn't you just say bread? And he's like, because it's not the same thing. And I realized, oh my God, yeah, obviously when you cook something, it changes. So toast has properties that will help you be more regular that bread doesn't. Not that we recommend either of those things on the Ancestral Mind podcast.
Yep.
The second thing is, I've always had this weird disconnect where I hate tomatoes, but love products that use tomatoes, like pizza sauce or spaghetti sauce.
Right.
There's a chemical in tomatoes that only a very tiny percentage of the population can taste, and it makes them taste rancid. And when they're cooked, they secrete the chemical. So that's why some people will like cooked tomatoes, sun-dried tomatoes maybe, or they like pizza sauce or ketchup, but they do not like a tomato on their sandwich.
Yeah, and you want to know why some plants have to be cooked? It's because that's how you remove the toxins.
Yeah.
So cooking is huge. I just read, I believe it's called Catching Fire. It was by a paleontologist who is postulating that the thing that really helped humans evolve, or Homo erectus to Homo sapiens, etc., was our control of fire, which allowed us to cook food, which allowed us to get more access to nutrition from meat, from starches, etc. There's definitely some good stuff in there. I've actually heard some counterpoints to his theory, because he kind of figures that by getting access to fire is when we really rapidly evolved. But I've heard counterpoints that said we actually were already evolving before we had access to fire, because you don't really need to cook a lot of meat or fat from animals, and you can still get a ton of nutrition. And so his book was focused on, because we need to eat starch to get starch in the wild, any starch whatsoever, plant material, you have to cook it like in the wild. Like you just have to really get the nutrition that you need to survive as a human animal, right? But we had so much access to meat and fatty fish, things like that, all things that you can eat raw, which kind of pokes holes in his theory. Either way, it was a really good book, fascinating read, and there's a lot to be learned just going deep and down into our evolutionary past to understand. Now, we don't have all these things figured out, and a lot of, it's just hard to really pinpoint timelines and things like that. But if there was something that you could signal as a first principle, it would be humans have to cook. I mean, we've been cooking for a long time, and we also really, really value cooked meat over not cooked meat, or actually any food, because it's the reason we love like a charred steak with the Maillard reaction on the top and the caramelized sugars and things like that. There's more nutrition in cooked food that we can access. And this is actually something interesting. You know that if you eat 100 calories of raw food, Brent, you will not actually be able to absorb 100 calories. It's actually almost like a way to list calories when something is raw.
Oh, so I should be eating all raw foods?
It would definitely help you. It's actually really hard to gain weight. There's been a ton of research done with people that he mentions in the book that tried to survive on a raw food diet, and they had to like eat all the time, and then they still felt hungry all the time, and they lost a ton of weight.
Interesting.
Like they couldn't keep weight on, because there's just certain mechanisms in cooking where you have to denature certain things and unfold certain things and give your body access to certain nutrients that a raw food diet just doesn't let you do.
The only thing I prefer raw is fish. Like most fish, I would prefer.
Yeah, I agree.
Raw.
So what were we talking about there? We're talking about cooking, slow cooking, raw, not raw. Let's get into the things to avoid, because we could talk about this for a while. I'm going to actually save differences between keto and paleo for the second part of this episode, because this one's going to be a little bit bigger. Avoid sugar, grains, and then I have here legumes, and I'll also put lentils and white starches, or actually just most starches, to be honest. Most starches. So why should people be avoiding sugar and grains? What do you think, Brent?
Well, in my experience, number one, the sugar is super addictive.
Yep.
And also in my experience, anything with sugar or grain is significantly more calorie dense for a smaller portion. So if you are trying to eat a real number of calories, if you're eating things with sugar, you're eating way too many, just because a small little thing with sugar in it has way more calories than a small little piece of meat, or whatever the case. So that's off the top of my head. Yeah,
most foods that contain sugar and grains are highly processed manufactured foods.
Makes sense.
Okay. You can't eat grains without processing, right? Like you can't. You would like throw up. You wouldn't even be able to eat it, right? Grains require a lot of processing to eat. Sugar, you can obviously get in fruit, but that's not where most people get it. Most people get it in drinks. They get it in cookies and ice cream and other things that are a bunch of ingredients put together that have sugar thrown in to make it taste good and are not good for you. And they are fast digesting. And that's another thing. And that's like, we can talk about that for a while, but like when you eat an apple, you have fiber, and you have to chew it, and you have other things that kind of slow the absorption of that sugar into your body. When you drink a Coke, there's nothing. It goes straight in, right? Like literal. And that speed actually makes a huge difference. Like if you were to eat an apple, and I think they've done some research about the absorption rates of things, but let's say that apple takes 2 hours to kind of get through your whole body. Well, it could take 2 hours to absorb 20 grams of sugar or whatever it is. But if you drank the same amount of Coke, you literally have that into your bloodstream, into your body, causing damage within like minutes, or even seconds, like immediate response. Mm-hmm. And that determines insulin response. It determines which then brings you down when you crash. Which insulin's primary mechanism in the body does a lot of things, but one of the primary things is a storage hormone. And so the faster you spike insulin, and the more glucose that gets into your bloodstream faster, the faster it is more likely, and the more likely it is to go to fat cells. And that like, again, we're going to have a whole, maybe a biochemistry episode where we talk about fat gain, fat loss. We talk about why calories in, calories out is kind of nonsense. And, calories matter, but they don't matter the way people think, and they don't matter as much as you'd think. And so that's why number 4, avoid grains, avoid sugar, avoid legumes, lentils, and these other things that are very carb dense that cause high insulin and high blood sugar responses because, and this is a heuristic, again, I'm not covering every part of this process, but the more insulin and the more blood sugar that you have in your body and in the shorter period of time, the more likely you are to gain fat. So this is why the heuristic for everyone should be the more sugar I eat and the more carbohydrates I eat, the more likely I am to gain fat.
Right.
Or on the flip side, or the more likely I am to prevent my body from burning fat. And this is what people don't understand. And this is where the whole like eat 7 meals a day thing, when they used to tell you like that's how you stoke your metabolism, is complete and utter nonsense. Why, Brent? Why, Brent?
What? Because
you don't know. I'm going to keep going.
We're going to go into it was the whole fasting and everything.
It was rhetorical, but
the
reason why is because even a little bit of insulin in your body, a little bit, basically halts fat gain, loss, fat loss. It halts fat loss. It because insulin is a storage hormone, and so like the whole like eat 6 meals a day, even if they're small meals. Well, every time you're spiking your insulin because when you spike your blood sugar, your insulin has to come in. This is cool. Let's get into it. So, did you know that your body maintains, I think it's like 5 grams of sugar in your whole body at any time? Like your blood sugar levels? Yeah, it's really small. And so, glucose in your blood stream, anything above or below that regulated amount is considered poison. So, what happens when you drink like a bunch of sugar and your glucose goes up really high? Well, your insulin comes in and has to put it somewhere. Do you know where that glucose could be shuttled to in your body?
Didn't you say the liver?
Liver's one place, but there's another really big other place too. Muscles.
Oh, okay.
So glycogen. That's where you can store glucose for energy for later. And now that's kind of one of the ways where like if you have more muscle mass, it is protective a little bit against obesity because you simply have more places that glucose can go, right?
And you burn more resting calories with massive
Yeah,
muscles.
that too. Once your muscle is filled, and your liver is filled, right? They both compete for storage of glucose, and then fructose is actually goes straight to your liver. So your liver competes with glucose and fructose, which is again why we talked about like sugar is so bad. Once those are full, where do you think they go? Where do you think extra stored glucose goes, or fructose in your body, which is basically energy? Fat. Yep.
For those at home that can't see this, I just grabbed my belly and shook it.
Straight to fat. And that's why, because of that. And so here's the thing. Most people, they, almost every time they eat, like they're filling up all of their muscles and all of their liver storage and immediately burning fat or storing fat, right? So, and this is why keto is getting people results, right? Because it's really mitigating a lot of that glucose transporting around the body, and it's reducing the amount of glucose that is being stored in muscles and liver, and which reduces the likelihood that you store calories in fat. And the reason keto also gets results for people is because it lowers insulin so much and manages insulin, and when the only time you can burn fat is when insulin is low. Like if you have high insulin levels, you will, and this is why people that do like the severe calorie restricted diets, like they can still eat 500 calories a day and not lose fat. It's because of insulin resistance, right? And so, and then even people like the Biggest Loser, even when they eventually lost weight, they're just sheer basically starvation. They gained it all back because there's some other mechanisms like body set point and leptin and these other things that they basically didn't allow their body to really adapt hormonally to be able to maintain that weight loss for a long period of time. And so that's why like yo-yo dieting and things like that, like for people, it always causes problems. But fundamentally, it's all about hormones. This is something people don't understand or they don't really pay attention to. And this is what always perplexes me about people that like ignore hormones or talk about how carbs don't matter or whatever. Like the only thing that stores or releases body fat in the human body is based on a hormone process, right? Like that's the first principle. We can agree on that.
Yes.
Right?
Of course.
Okay. So if and then in the food kingdom, the food kingdom or the food, just food in general, The number one thing that dictates hormones is, do you know, Brent?
Whether you pay her or not.
Pay what?
Whether you pay her or not.
Pay who or not?
If you want to make a hormone, you don't pay her.
Hormone? You totally lost me. If you're going for a joke, it's right over my head.
How do you not get this?
I don't get it at all.
I shouldn't have. If you want to make a whore moan,
PG
you don't pay her.
PG-13. Oh, you're so dumb. Oh my God, what a moron. This is my co-host, ladies and gentlemen. Probably edit that out though. But the number one thing food-wise that affects hormones is, let's try this again, Brent. What is the number one thing that affects hormones in the human body? Carbohydrates.
Okay, carbs, yes.
Yes.
That was fast.
Okay.
I was going to get there.
Do you know what effect fat has on hormones? Dietary fat?
Well, as far as I can tell, it probably does. When you start burning fat as opposed to burning carbohydrates, it probably would have some hormonal response that I don't know about. But
eating fat, though, what does eating fat do?
To me, that would seem neutral, but I don't know the answer to that.
It's neutral, but it may even help buffer hormones, so it might even help regulate.
Oh, okay.
Which is why they say eat fat with every meal, right? Protein affects hormones, but only a tiny percent or a smaller percent compared to carbohydrates. Okay. Now, these are first principles of biology. Like when you eat a carbohydrate, this is what happens to your body. When you eat a gram of fat, this is what happens to your body. When you eat a gram of protein, this is what happens to your body, right? And if you put them on a scale, if you map them out, carbohydrates has the highest hormone response out of anything else you can eat. Okay, obviously alcohol would be its own thing, and that topic for another day. But what is at the base of our food pyramid? Remember?
Oh yeah, the food pyramid, the beautiful food pyramid. The bottom being the bread and the grains. And what's
the primary macronutrient in bread and grains?
Carbs.
So
yeah,
especially fast digesting white carbohydrates that aren't found in whole foods, so they're not protective in any way. Right? They literally go right into your blood. They've already been highly processed for you by a machine or a company or whatever, which increases the insulin spike. It increases the blood sugar load. And it just when you start thinking about these things and talking about them, it all starts making sense. And so eating small meals, eating a carb-based diet, you can see how literally based on your human biology that is universal for all of us, can't you see how backwards that is? I mean,
yeah.
What do you think? Isn't that insane?
I have a random question for you that came up in the middle of this. How do you feel about those cold pressed juices that are in all the healthy stores? Because I had a long argument with Lockie and RJ about this.
Okay, well,
I tried to tell them that it was not healthy to
tell me
eat
what
that.
Their defense was. What were they saying?
I remember looking at what they had there, and it was a cold pressed juice that was 400 calories or something like that. And I remember telling them, that is not a healthy thing to drink.
Mm-hmm.
You drinking that makes you think you're drinking something healthy because you got it out of this part of the store that looks healthy, but you're not. And they're like, how can it be unhealthy if it's just juice from fruit, basically? So I could be wrong, but I was, and it's hard to be a fat guy and try to tell somebody something is not healthy because they're just going to look at you and be like, you're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
I know all these things. I just don't choose to implement them. Okay. So
let's think about this. So I'm going to give you the ancestral explanation first, and then we're going to get into just the basic biology and the chemical and the hormones and all that. And that's how we'll end the show. So this is a good thing to go on. So they grabbed a juice. So you said it had 400 calories. So it probably had...
I'm making that up. I don't remember what it was, but it was a lot of calories.
It probably
for
had
a small thing.
It probably had 40 to 60 grams of sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So based on our discussion so far today, what is the number one thing that contributes to fat gain in the human animal?
Is sugar or carbs in general.
Well, and carbs are sugar, but it's another category. But yes, it's sugar and carbs, right? Now, what in the carb category, what contributes to fat gain even more? It's a carb, but it's a different kind of carb.
You're talking about fructose specifically.
And fructose is sugar. So you could say sugar, but it would be fructose, right? So if you have a purely white starch, so like a potato, for example, It's going to have the same amount of calories. It's going to be a fast digesting carbohydrate, but it's going to have 0 grams of fructose, right? If you have a gram of fructose, or a gram of sugar, I should say, it's going to be 50% glucose, 50% fructose. Now, why is sugar more likely to contribute to fat gain based on what we've talked about today? Why is a gram of sugar?
Wait, because it's harder to process. Or I'm sorry, it creates more of a hormonal response when it's processed.
Well, actually, the hormone response could be the same, and sometimes white starch has a more of a hormone response. So it's actually another mechanism I'm looking for. And a gram of sugar, right? How is that processed in your body?
It's what's stored in your blood, your muscles, and your liver, correct?
Muscles and liver, right? But what also gets stored in the liver that can only be processed in the liver?
I'm missing this. You should answer your own question. I'm going to answer it wrong.
Okay, what's a gram of sugar comprised of?
A gram, it's comprised of...
It's 50-50 something.
50, yeah, okay, you're right. 50% fructose.
And 50% glucose.
And 50% glucose,
okay.
Yes.
So which one of those molecules can only be processed in the liver?
Oh, okay, yeah. We
fructose.
Went over, the fructose can only go in the liver.
So
yes.
if you ingest, let's say you ingest 40 grams of sugar, 20 grams of glucose can be processed and used in your body in all the places we talked about. But 20 grams can only go to the liver.
Right.
Right? So if you fill up your muscles real quick, or they're already filled from your last meal, or whatever it is, right? Which is the case for most people. Like, most people aren't active enough to actually deplete their glycogen stores. So there's already a limited area in the body of where this fuel can even go, right? Since you're limited by the fructose, only the fructose can be processed in the liver and stored in the liver. You are limited even more. And when you're limited by the storage, what happens when you run out of storage? For glucose or fructose,
it's stored in your fat
immediately into fat. It
right.
literally, it's like a bucket. It gets full, and then all the extra just spills over and turns magically into fat. Okay, so the number one thing that contributes to fat gain in a human is what? Is
ingesting sugar.
Sugar. Period. Just sugar. That's the easy way to think about it. Literally just sugar. And then obviously, like, if you like, do you know that agave is like 95% fructose?
Really?
It's even worse than straight like beet sugar. Yeah.
Oh.
Because it's got so much fructose. So don't ever buy honey. Even has a lot of fructose. It's like 80 or 85% fructose, which is, I'm not a fan of honey at all. A little bit here and there is not a big deal, but I'm not a fan of honey. And then now that is the biochemical. Those are the mechanisms, right? These are just like biology and what happens when you ingest a food. So that would at least right there tell you that thing that's straight sugar, right, is not good for you, right? Especially for people that, like, those people were probably already overweight or trying to lose weight or whatever, right? It's even worse for them. Okay?
Right.
Now,
so I want to get to more parts of that argument. Which would you, if you're gun to your head, you have to pick one of the two. Which is better for you to drink? A can of Coke with less sugar and less calories, or that entire cold pressed juice?
I don't know if Coke would be a good example because, we don't even know what else they put in Coke. But I would probably say the Coke because they had less sugar and less calories. More and even more so just less sugar. If you, that's a tough one. But if you were trying to lose weight, or you could even say it this way, what would be the thing least likely to cause fat gain or to prevent fat loss? It would be the Coke,
right? For
sure, 100%, hands down, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Not that we're saying you should be going out and drinking Coke.
Yeah, and I don't know what like the better net health benefit over the long run would be. Like, maybe it is a fruit juice, just because we don't know what they put in Coke. But as far as fat loss goes and preventing fat gain, definitely would be the fruit juice would cause more damage, and that's why juice fasting and all that crap they sell, complete. Scam.
God, that what was that documentary?
Complete scam.
That Sick and Nearly Dead. There's somebody like told me you have to watch this. It'll change your life, and I'm just watching it. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
He didn't if you drink your food, you're gonna lose weight because this is insane. This is the most unhealthy thing I'd ever seen.
And I think a lot of that is if it's like with celery juice or greens, that's one thing. But the juices where they're tasty, sweet juices with 30 to 40 grams of sugar in a serving, no, absolutely not. Not good for you in any way. And you don't need to spend $70 or $80 on a freaking week of juice fasting. It's just garbage.
And you did
Pure
a
garbage.
lot of research on this because right when cold pressed juices started becoming a thing, you were thinking of opening a different company that was, I think we were going to call it Rock Juice or something, but it was.
I still like some. I like some juices in some ways. I actually like nut milks better, but it's just hard to do them without adding sugar to make them sweet. You know,
right?
Like you can do like stevia and monk fruit and things like that, but it's just hard to make drinks. So yeah, that's why we didn't do that company.
All right, sweet tangent. That was a good one.
Now, where were we with that? So you were defending, or you had your friends that said that, and we established that it's not healthy because it literally is a liquid fat gain. They should just call it liquid fat gain. That's what fruit juice should be. And obviously, fruit juice, most people kind of understand this point that fruit juice is not a health food. It is a refined food that is literally pure sugar. Oh, this is what we're going to do. So I was going to give you the ancestral reason for explaining fat gain and fruit and all these things. Okay. The ancestral reason for this is food in the wild, or fruit, I should say, in the wild, is available at a limited time of the year, generally.
Right.
It's also when it's
in season.
It's when it's the most ripe. That's when it's the tastiest. That's also when it has the most fructose. Okay. Now, we've already established that fructose is like auto fat. It's pretty much what that does. Why do you think there would be a lot of fructose? And why would the fruit be so super sweet at a very select time of the year?
I think I know this. The trees need to spread their seeds or something.
That is a mechanism. That's a mechanism that the fruit itself uses, or the plant itself uses to procreate. Yes, that is absolutely correct. And so I guess it's not even the purpose, but what would the byproduct be for us so that we would adapt to gain fat? This is basically it. Like, we adapted to gain fat when we had access to fructose.
Right, because it was not the winter for the most part. So
it was before the winter.
Yeah, we were getting fatter to store more energy for the winter when it was harder to get food.
And so here's the thing. Mother Nature basically figured out, like, oh, well, fruit is around a certain time. And, you know, it's just, we can't really explain why Mother Nature did this, but we basically adapted so that when we would have access to fruit, which is a lot of times available before winter, when it's the juiciest and sweetest and has the most fructose in it, we would eat this fruit, we would store fat, and we would be able to more likely survive winter. Because why, ladies and gentlemen, in the wild, fat is a survival tool.
Correct.
So, I mean, it literally explains it, right? And that's why today fructose is in everything. Yet we're only designed to eat fructose sometimes, and all these nasty byproducts of fatty liver and obesity and whatever is a result of having fructose and obviously glucose and sugar, and then even carbs. They cause problems too, as the bulk of our diet. And it just it's bad news bears. Bad news bears. I think that's a good place to wrap up because it is now 10 p.m. and I should be home, and this was supposed to have taken 1 hour, and it's now taken 2. And so let's wrap up with what to expect.
I will say, I want to say this. Our second version of this episode was way better. Like, we were more focused. We had more appropriate tangents. You may not think that because we left that on the cutting room floor, but I'm telling you, this podcast had a better flow, and the people are going to appreciate this content more, and they're going to let us know that they appreciate this comment by giving us a good rating.
I got one word for you. Confirmation bias.
That's 2 fucking words, you
I know it's 2 words, and I was just wondering if you'd catch it. Well, so personal life stuff and rants, that's fine. We can just go on this real quick for whatever energy I have left until I decide to stop. So, you got anything?
No, I didn't have anything ready. I ingested a couple of personal things, going into that, going through that. So, that was it. The Super Bowl, I don't know when we're actually going to release this episode, but the Super Bowl was last night. It was the most boring Super Bowl I'd ever seen.
Yeah, and that's what
happens when you put a vegan behind the quarterback.
For all of you that want to win at life, say no to sports and public entertainment because it's just a distraction. I always equate things like soccer and football to the Roman games that they created to literally keep the mob entertained from their harsh existence.
Yes, that's why we have.
And it's kind of the same the way it is today.
Lot of things.
Most people are zombie walking through life. In fact, That's what I want to talk
That's
about.
how they distract us from the 1%.
I want to talk about something. I want to talk about mindset and how you literally create your reality based on what you think. What do you think about that?
All right, I'm down to create a reality. Let's
I have been frustrated because and I was thinking of analogies for this because I've been trying to motivate people and get them to think a certain way and do all these things. And, people just don't come around on your watch. Like sometimes they come around, sometimes they don't, right? But I feel like the way to probably get people to come around, even though this is the hardest, most frustrating way, is it's almost like erosion. Like you have to be the wave that constantly pounds on the rock until eventually their layer of like nonsense, resistance, whatever is weathered away until then you can get to the inside and then they'll like open their mind.
Changing a core belief is next to impossible. It is
Any
very
beliefs,
long-term
anything,
process.
any beliefs, not just like even big ones. It's like, and I think most people just don't realize that, oh man, there's a lot of things, but I think the big one, this is the big one. Every single successful person in the world, every single person that's ever done anything or whatever, they are just a human and they're fallible and they're nothing special. They might have done something special. They might have worked towards something special, but they are still a fallible human being. And there is no reason that you can't do the same thing or your own thing or whatever it is. And I see people always feeling like that these famous people have it figured out, or that this person that's more along the path on, is somehow this mystical special person that they like need, that has the permission or has the right to do these things or has the right to go out and make money and do things in buildings. And it's like, that's complete and utter nonsense. And people limit themselves based on these mindsets, like this way of thinking. And it's frustrating to me because we need a lot more people to open their mind and be willing to take risks and do things, because that's the only way we're going to change the world. Maybe we'll solve this global warming thing if enough people like got out there and actually did something about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mentioning the global warming thing, do you ever watch South Park?
Well, no.
They made fun of global warming like years and years ago when Al Gore came out with An Inconvenient Truth.
Yeah.
And they just busted on Al Gore like crazy. They made him this like super douchey character, and he would always go around being like, "Come on, guys, I'm super serial." They just released an episode earlier this year, literally just apologizing to him. The whole episode was the kids had to apologize to Al Gore because they didn't believe in Man Bear Pig, which was the incarnation of climate change.
Uh-huh.
And it was pretty cool. That was their core belief on climate change changed.
Yeah.
And they made it a very public thing. They're like, "Look, yeah, we screwed up."
How many years did that take, though?
It took a lot of years. Now, they said some things about it, but didn't really like very specifically go in and change it. Because South Park's whole thing is they've been libertarians from like day one, and they think that if you really care about anything, it's not cool. So they'll attack any religious group or anybody or PETA or whatever, if they have like a massive overarching dogmatic belief. And at the time, that's when Al Gore was being he was being a little bit douchey about it. So it was easier to attack Al Gore than it was to attack the message, and they did as comedy. But yeah, their core belief on that changed. And why did it change? Because you can't, like, the science behind what is happening with climate change is basically irrefutable. There is the only way you can say that what's happening with climate change is not real is if you think that all of the scientists have created a conspiracy to release false information to make you recycle.
Yeah. Well, so what about what I was talking about?
I'm
more interested in talking and thinking about everyday people, whether it's people around me or it's people that ask me questions on Instagram or email, or it's people that there are so many intelligent, capable people out there that just will live their entire lives taking what's comfortable because either that's the conditioning they have from their childhood or because they don't think they're good enough or some other bullshit. And I can't stand it when I see that.
You are unique in that aspect where you really feel some responsibility to help somebody change. That's why you've got this podcast. That's why you've got that brand. I am not as good of a person in that regard when somebody is dug in on a belief. And I think that I could make their life better if I could show them a different way of thinking. but I know what it's going to take for that to happen, I choose to avoid it and take the path of least resistance.
Yeah, but okay, you're thinking about politics, like in that kind of shit.
Not specifically.
I know, but it's like that might be true, but most of the things that I try to get people to do is to just open their mind, let go of their limiting beliefs, and just like believe in themselves, like things that they should want to do, right? And yeah, I feel like I have to try. I do. And I get frustrated at times. And sometimes I'm more motivated and sometimes I'm more frustrated. But I'm really I want to figure out, and maybe I need to like really, really spend a lot of time on this, but I want to figure out what I can do to help people wake up. Like, obviously I recommend books, I recommend articles, I do things like that with my small group. I'm doing this with like the podcast, things like that. I'm trying to spread ideas, but I'm just like throwing a wide net and I'm going to catch like kind of the fish that are like a little bit open to being caught. But I want to figure out what can be done to get to even just open up, peel back some of the layers and make people a little bit more self-aware, right? And just open their mind a little bit to at least be able to give themselves a little bit more opportunity to just do something and be something and think differently, even if it's just a little bit. I mean, you know, you could talk about bias. We could talk about like pitfalls we see. Maybe we should just pick out some examples of things that either you've thought about in your life and or used to thinking that you don't anymore, or examples of other people in your life that have done that and that have evolved or not evolved, or people that have been stuck in the same places for years saying the same stupid bullshit. Like, you know, like we all have all these examples, and I don't really know which one I really want to focus on, but I really want people to stop being victims of their own comfortability and their own myopic worldview. Like, I want people to just expand.
Yeah. One of the principles that I have in life, and that's actually helped me be open-minded, is I consider raw dogmatic belief in anything to be wrong. You need to be open to the fact that what you're thinking could be incorrect, because we don't have all the information today. We don't have all the information tomorrow. In fact, if we look back at this specific podcast 10 years from now, I bet you we're going to say something that we have changed our mind on. And maybe we changed our mind for the better, maybe we changed it for the worse, but we are two people that are open to changing our minds and changing our worldview. Not everybody is like that. The biggest thing in my life probably was I went to a Catholic school when I was a kid. I had been taught religion was real, believe in God, believe in Jesus, all this stuff. And then as I got older and started to kind of do my own research and figure things out and think about things scientifically, I came to the conclusion that there is no higher power. There was even a period of time where I was agnostic, where I might have thought that there's a higher power, but maybe it's not God, maybe something else. And then I went out of that, but it took a long time. It took years and years and years and different things over my upbringing and as I went into adulthood to think that. So that was a core belief that changed because I was open to change and open to things like that.
What are some things though about life though? Like, again, I think what I'm talking about is more success, personal development, even just, being willing to, like, maybe one day quit your job and do something you love. Like, I mean, people literally will be slaves to a job they don't like for their whole life because they think that's the only way, or even worse, because they have to like get a Tesla and now they're basically in a rat race or whatever. Like, there's just so much status quo bullshit built into our society that I just can't stand it. I mean, what about for you? Like, what are some things or people around you maybe, or examples? I mean, for me, I guess it's like, I just know people, and I've seen them over the years, that still think they have to like reach some point or get some kind of permission or get some kind of certification or go to enough events or read enough books or whatever to somehow be worthy of something. And the second you just drop that and say, I am worthy and this is my rate and this is what I'm going to do. Like, for most people, the second that happens, that's the first step. But I see so many people that won't even make that step. They're like doing all these things because they think that's what they need to take the step. But all they have to do is take the damn step. It's just do it and make the decision and then go from there and figure it out and learn and grow and build and whatever. You got any examples of that, of people in your life or friends or family, or even what you've done? Like, what are some examples of things that maybe you were limited mentally? Like, did you ever have that whole like have you ever felt imposter syndrome? Have you ever felt like you've been held back from things you could have done? I mean, are you like on the path of self-awareness and doing new things? I mean, you moved to Austin, like it's kind of a big deal. Like what?
Yeah, there's been a lot of things that probably fit that description. When you were talking there, one of the things that I would think of is travel, where when you tell people you should travel and experience things, and they have a list of excuses prepared for why they can't do that, rather than a list of things they need to accomplish so that they can. And once you've decided, hey, I want to go to Europe for 2 months, or
I'm going to Europe for 2 months.
Sorry, not that you've decided you want to, but that you are going to do it. I promise you can figure it out and you can do it. And it doesn't cost that much more to go there than it does to live at home. So it really is.
So you're saying maybe you've told people, or you've tried to get them to travel with you, and you hear those kind of excuses.
Yeah, I hear those. I mean, I have a lot of friends who have up and done it.
Yeah.
The last time I did a long Europe trip, I was there for 45 days, I think, and I just planned the whole trip alone. I was going by myself, and my friend Brian Goldstein joined me. He just was like, yeah, all right, I can do this. Let's make it happen. And he went. So I was just budget conscious the whole time, and I made sure everything fit within, and I traveled, and it was fine. I've spent 180 days at sea on cruise ships. I've done all that stuff, and I've done all that stuff because I just decided I wanted to do it. So
yeah, you also you mentioned they make either reasons for doing it or excuses why they can't.
Right.
And that is growth versus fixed mindset. And I think that is probably a good thing that we could cover and give some examples of, and then we'll close with that, because a lot of times that is what it is. Most people, and to your point about travel, like I know people that have literally
never left their state.
Yeah, and that probably won't ever. Or they'll go one place their entire life.
Yeah, they think traveling to the city that's a 2-hour drive away is traveling.
Yeah, it's always money, or it's always some BS, right? It's never, I'm going to go here, and then I'm just going to like do what I need to do to make it happen. Mm-hmm. It's like I know. It's very frustrating. But
and then there's another group of people that go travel and stay inside the hotel and eat inside the hotel and don't leave the hotel, and they think they're traveling, but that's another story.
Never experienced that. That's just weird.
Yeah.
But so the growth versus fixed mindset. So are you familiar with this concept, Brent?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with it by name, but
what do you think a growth mindset is?
The growth mindset is I am, if I'm going to define something I've never heard the definition for before, I am going to get better at this, or I'm going to do these things in a better way, a different way, rather than I can't do these things because of these limiting factors.
Okay, a little bit, kind of. So stripping it down kind of away from our example, a growth mindset is about the idea that if I do something, I will get better. So it's effort equals reward and improvement. Now, with that definition being of growth, what do you think a fixed mindset is?
That is, I'm already as good as I can get at something.
Yeah, or I'm already good or bad at this.
Yes.
And so obviously we all had this, because I was like, I'm not good at math. And then when I got out of school and I was in business and I'm like messing with spreadsheets, I'm like, I'm good at math.
Yeah, or when you were crushing souls at poker.
Right. But now it's like I'm good at math because I've invested a ton of time into figuring this stuff out.
Yes.
Right. And this is like, I think, one of the biggest plagues in the school system, and even parenting, and how we like tell kids, oh, you're naturally gifted or whatever. That's nonsense. What they tell you should say is you should always say, you worked really hard at baseball and now you're really good. That's awesome. Like stuff like that, right? You got to implant into their seed the connection between work and progress. Now, how does this apply though to what we were talking about in personal development in life? Like where are some examples that you've seen in your life of people that have had a fixed or growth mindset? Well, I mean, it's kind of applied to travel, because that is basically those two different people.
I mean, we can be very completely personal with me. When I lost weight that first time, I had never run before in my entire life, and my answer to that was I can't run. I tried to play soccer. I was a goalkeeper, so I wasn't running around the field. I was a good one, but I didn't there wasn't a lot of running involved. And every time I ran, I got a massive stitch in my side. So I just thought there was something wrong with my body, so there was no way I could run. But I didn't research that, obviously. So the second time, I'm like, makes no sense that I'm the only one on the planet that can't run, right? So I just started researching it, and I found out why I was getting that stitch and how to fix it. And then I was able to successfully run through a 5K within, say, 2 or 3 months of making that decision.
Yeah.
Which, if you had told me at 18 years old, Brent, you could do this, I would have thought you were batshit insane.
Yeah, your research allowed you to basically dispel some of your fixed mindset.
Yep. And then I just got slightly better and better at the running situation each week.
Why do you think people would be afraid of a growth mindset, though?
Status quo, probably. Like they like things the way they are. They want to come home and watch the nightly news every night. They want to come home.
Well, yeah, comfort and routine, sure.
Yeah.
But what does a growth mindset kind of imply? Like, what comes with the territory?
Well, they don't want failure either. So if they try to do something that they currently can't do and then fail at it, that's going to feel worse than not trying at all for some people. So they can't handle.
I guess I could see
slow
that.
strides.
Maybe, but it's more a growth mindset implies you have to work.
Yes.
Like it's literal investment of time / work equals result. Like that's growth mindset. That's what it is, right? Fixed mindset is I'm just good at this, so I don't even got to practice or I don't got to try or whatever, right? That's why you will never see, and it's like this conversation we had with Ebony last night, a friend of ours who is friends with Shaq, and he was like ripping on her saying like no, you need to think like a champion. You don't, right? And he was like yelling at her because, and she'll readily admit it, because she's very limited in a lot of her mindset beliefs about certain things around what they were talking about. And my point was the reason Shaq was doing that, he's probably taking out on you, is because he's the type of guy that everyone around him, he just sees like probably potential, and he just gets pissed off that everyone is just like so lazy or stuck in their own whatever. And that's kind of how I feel a lot of times. Like I get frustrated when I see wasted potential because I know what any human can accomplish. We're the most intelligent species in the known universe, even the dumbest of us. And we can all do things if we just focus and go and do it and believe. And you have to believe. That's why every champion is an eternal growth optimist. They believe it can happen. They believe in the process, and they believe in themselves, and they believe that if they just invest the time, they will do the thing. And like I think a fixed mindset is like the current greatest sickness in our culture today.
That or obesity.
Or what?
Or obesity. But then again, I guess a fixed mindset can lead to that.
No, dude, fixed mindset. Okay, here's a good one. Every time I've ever been at a coffee shop and there's been overweight people next to me, you would not believe the amount of victim mindset, fixed mindset bullshit that comes out of their mouth. It's like, I'm telling you, it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because people create these illusions about what they can or can't do, about what's easier or natural or not or whatever. Like it, I mean, most obesity, like obviously there are exceptions here, is going to be a result of mindset. And it might not be growth or fixed, but a lot of times it is. You know, people put limitations on themselves based on what they've done or based on how they grew up or whatever, right? And like, it's hard to lose weight for those of you that have the fat gene. It is. And there's a lot of research that shows how you were born, how your mother ate, even things that happened when you were a child and in the womb. You know, like there's a lot of variables that either make it very hard for you to gain weight or very easy to gain weight. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of variables here. And so anyone that like you get like these trainers or people that like kind of fat shame people or whatever, and just talk about how like, oh, you just have to work harder and eat less and like that kind of bullshit. No, that's nonsense, especially with the nutrition advice that's been perpetuated in our country, like low fat, high carb, all this BS dogma that has literally been keeping people fat and sick for the past 40, 50 years, right? Then you add that plus having the fat gene and like being hard to lose fat, like it's no joke. Like I'm not going to pretend for a second that it's easy to lose weight, but the best way the best platform you have to live the best way, and it's the reason we're doing this podcast, is when you understand where the human animal, where it comes from, how it's designed, the first principles of biology. Like we talked about hormones today. Most diet books and advice and trainers and podcasts, whatever, have no idea how insulin works. Insulin is the number one thing you need to understand to gain or lose fat. It's as simple as that. Gain or lose weight even, right? Like it's an internal in fact, most doctors don't even know. In fact, most doctors, they understand, what was it? I think they don't understand biology, but they understand like anatomy. Like there was some, I wrote this down one day, I forgot, but it's like they understand like how the certain things in the human body works, but they don't understand maybe some of the interplay of other things, like how food affects, biology and things like that. And that's just one example. Like most doctors don't know shit about nutrition, but yeah. So obviously a lot of stuff to talk about. I maybe some books we can give people to recommend. Maybe we can have a call to action. What do you think? Because we're gonna have part 2 in this, and the next one we're gonna do a lot of food again. Maybe we'll bring a guest on the show.
Yeah. If maybe we could ask, here's my call to action in this. If you liked this kind of section here about the mindset and then the rant, email us what you think you have that you can't change and why.
Or email,
and Colin will yell at you and tell you.
Email us some of your limiting beliefs. Email us like a short blurb about maybe your current situation or things that are holding you back. I get these comments on YouTube. We get them on our email regularly. Try to keep it short. I've literally had people send me like 6-page emails, and I'm just like, you actually think I'm going to read this? And again, that's just not good form. Any of you that reach out to people online, like, or just
when we're processing hundreds of emails in a day, we need to be able to read it quick.
Well, here's the thing. Anyone that is ever reaching out to someone via email, if you want your email read, it needs to be as short as possible. Yeah. That's just like a good practice. Like these long 2-page rants or whatever, or like you got to get every point out, you need to just assume every extra word you add to that email decreases the likelihood that it gets read by like, double, triple, whatever, right? You could probably study this stuff. Like you probably use eye tracking software to figure out like once you hit this point, none of that gets read.
Yeah.
So just don't write long emails. It's a bad thing. And actually, I've had some major partnership issues in the past from writing long, heated emails that I definitely should have saved as a draft, and I should not have hit send. And I did hit send, and as a result, a lot of shit happened. Right. So good thing, just don't do that. So yeah, if you want to hear more about the mindset stuff or share your story, we'll try to take what you said, and with that little bit of information, we'll talk about it a little bit. Like I want to do more episodes on mindset. We'll even get into the evolutionary biology around the ancestral mind, actually around how you think, right? Like things like why you interact with people, why we have scarcity mindset, why we're tribalistic and naturally even can be racist at times. Why, like we talked about that in show number 2 about, how we have to be skeptical of things. Like all these things, the way humans interact, the way we think, the way we argue politics, the way we dig in when we believe something, these are all byproducts of being a human animal that evolved in nature with other humans in a small tribal setting. It literally explains everything. So we're definitely going to cover a lot of the mindset stuff. Anything to add before we wrap up?
No, that was a great rant section. So maybe what I will say at the end here is, the members of the Ancestral Mind podcast are not nutritional advisors. We are not dietitians. Make sure you consult a medical professional that understands the world, not one that doesn't, about any changes in your diet or changes in your lifestyle if you need to. This is just our opinion. It is
this is
presented
for entertainment value only. Entertainment value only. But if you do decide to... No, I'm not even going to go there. It's entertainment value only.
Yes.
But these are things that have worked for us. And don't do dumb things. Obviously, consult your doctor so that at least legally, you have... well, I guess if you consult him and you do something and it doesn't work out, then, maybe you can sue him. I don't know if that's what you want to do, but at least you have
Don't sue us, though. We have that disclaimer.
Just don't... Well, you can't sue us because
you
we got a disclaimer here. So anyways, be smart and think ancestrally. And I think that is a wrap because it's past 10 o'clock.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe,
do all the stuff.
Reach out, and we're out of here.
Peace.